audio, you will select this little button down at the bottom of your screen and you can call in using the computer. If you're having issues with that, you can also call in for audio using these numbers here. You can also click on the tab that says, I think it says communicate now, and check your audio connection or do a speaker microphone audio test. And also wanted to draw everyone's attention to the chat box over on the right-hand screen. So I have muted all the participants for now. Not that we don't want to hear what you have to say right now, but it's just easier if you have background noise going on to keep it clear. And then at the end, we'll definitely have time for Q&A, and so I'll unmute you all then. You're also welcome to put things into the chat box now as questions that we can take at the end, or as if you're having some sort of issue, you can chat, put it in the chat box and I can help you out for sure. All right, well, thank you all for joining us today. So we're going to be talking about beginning farmer rancher development program and sort of as an intro for ranchers and grazers. And so we have myself, Lindsay Davies, like I said. I'm joined with Allison Goin and Monica Pless. They're going to introduce themselves in a minute, but these women are really just have so much experience in this field with BFRDP, with training beginning farmers. So very honored to have them here on this webinar with us today. So thank you both for being here. Here's the general agenda for today's webinar. So myself and Allison will introduce ourselves. We'll give a little update about BFRDP, the funding of it, the RFA, what we know right now. I'll talk a little bit about what new entry is and this grant program that we have to support these sort of webinars. And then Allison will go into the BFRDP program, and Monica will talk about the organization she works for, Quivira Coalition, and the needs of the beginning ranchers that she works with. And then again, at the end, we'll definitely have time for Q&A. We want to hear from you all, your questions, your stories as well. So BFRDP is funded through the Farm Bill, and the request for applications or request for proposals for next year has not been released yet. Normally it's released towards the end of the year, and it closes in the beginning part of the next year. With the Farm Bill as it is right now, the House and Senate are still trying to reconcile where they're at with their Farm Bills. It's supposed to be cleared up by the end of the month, but we're all basically still waiting and watching to see what's going to happen. But regardless of what happens, we hope to have BFRDP funded, and right now is really the time to be planning your BFRDP. So attending these sort of webinars is a great start to help you learn more about the process and to give you ideas to plan your grant. A great resource is National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition blog. They give a lot of great updates about where the Farm Bill is at. So you can check that website out for more info. So a little bit about me, just in a general sense. So again, I work with New Entry Sustainable Farming Project currently. I have apprenticed on an organic vegetable farm in New Jersey and spent the past 5 years working with beginning farmers in Georgia. So I'm relatively new to the New England area, but I was working with University of Georgia Student Farm, working with students there. I got my master's in horticulture from UGA, and I helped to coordinate the Journeyman program, which was a program for beginning farmers that ran throughout Georgia, and that was funded through the BFRDP program, and it was for vegetable farmers as well as sheep and goat farmers. So now my work with New Entry works to support the national networks that we have. We have an incubator network and ag apprentice network, both meant for professionals working with these beginning farmers, helping them to share resources. We host webinars, we have gatherings for both of these networks that we're working on right now, and basically as a way to share resources across the country with beginning farmer personnel. I also help to work to support these national grant applicants and grantees of BFRDP, and of CFP, which is Community Food Projects, which is a different grant, also through USDA. So new entry, we have a lot of different projects going on, but we're based in Lowell, Massachusetts, and we have an incubator farm here. We also have a food hub, and then I work in the national realm, again, working with the national networks and national grant recipients. And so this webinar is provided by support with an Education Enhancement Team grant from BFRDP. And so the goal of that is really to help beginning applicants for BFRDP learn more about the processes behind it. Not really to review the basics of the RFA, but to encourage creative and strategic thinking about utilizing the BFRDP grant program to support the beginning farmers that you all are working with. And so we've done a good bit of work in this realm, and so I wanted to highlight some of the things that we have available. We've worked to understand the challenges that new BFRDP applicants have. And so we have training materials for these new applicants, such as previously recorded webinars, and I'll send out links to all these things. But we have one about BFRDP evaluation plans, for instance. And we have another one about building successful partnerships, which Allison Goin also helps to lead. And so these are just great webinars to watch and as you're prepping for your BFRDP. We also have an online portal for frequently asked questions related to BFRDP process, and an online self-assessment tool to see if this grant is a good fit for your organization as well. So again, I'll send out an email to links to all of these great resources. They'll also send out a survey, which is a really great way for you guys to provide feedback and let us know about webinars or resources that you would really like to see that you would benefit from. So please fill out the survey. I do read them. Thank you. So now I'm going to turn it over to Allison. She's going to introduce herself and dive into the good stuff.
Great, thanks, Lindsay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. Okay, hopefully everyone else can. If you can't hear or you're having trouble, please make sure you send a message, and we'll try to help resolve that issue for you. So I'm an independent consultant. I've been consulting on my own for 7 years, and prior to that, spent a decade working in nonprofit organizations. Since I started consulting, I've really focused on food and farming because it's my passion and interest and what I wanted to do, and started working with the USDA about 6 years ago with the previous Farm Bill cycle, and have worked on 42 proposals to USDA programs. I've worked with a dozen different programs out of the USDA, different departments, and my proposals so far have resulted in $3.4 million in new funding for all nonprofit organizations. I've done a little bit of work too with food businesses and farms directly, but I mostly work with the organizations that support farmers and food businesses. And I've done reporting and managing of projects that get funded, and so I've seen things from that side as well in terms of reporting and evaluation. There's more information about my consulting practice at AllisonGoin.com, and my email address is also in this presentation. So feel free to contact me personally if you have any questions. In addition to my work with New Entry, I do lots of private consultation with organizations, so I'm happy to hear from you. All right, so today we are talking about the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program. This is a federal grant program. Like Lindsay said, it's funded by the Farm Bill. It comes through the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, which I say is NIFA, but I actually don't know how you pronounce that acronym, but that's how I say it. And they are the department that administers this grant program and a number of other programs. The USDA has divided their grant funding into a number of different departments. You know, like Lindsay said, the Farm Bill is being negotiated right now. The current Farm Bill is going to run out at the end of this month, and so we're hoping really right now that there's going to be an extension of the current Farm Bill granted at least for a few months so that all the programs will continue to operate until they can finish negotiating on the new one. There has been a little bit of discussion about taking this program, BFRDP, and combining it with another program, which is referred to as the 2501 program, or the Outreach and Assistance for Socially Disadvantaged Farmers program, into one big program that would support beginning farmers. So that's a possibility, but I think regardless of what happens, it's very likely that there will be continued funding for beginning farmers because this program has been very successful. And we will send out a link to a report that was completed last year through some EET funding, just like we got for this project, where they evaluated the results of all the prior grants that they've made. And it's a really great resource because it summarizes a lot of best practices, and things that we've talked about in our webinars really are supported by the data they got back from the projects as well. So that's another place to look. Basically, this program is designed to support beginning farmers and ranchers. They have a very specific definition of how that's done. It's listed here: the delivery of education, mentoring, and technical assistance. I always say this just in case you don't know. Technical assistance really means any kind of help that you're giving to farmers on what we would consider a technical issue, which is something specific to the business of farming. It doesn't mean at all technology technical. It just means it's specific to farming and therefore a specialized form of assistance. And that can be one-to-one or in groups or any other kind of format. And the overall goal of BFRDP is they want to see successful farm businesses. And maybe I didn't say this in here, or maybe I did. See. No. BFRDP, so beginning means a farmer with 0 to 10 years of experience. So 10 years is actually a lot, and maybe a lot of people wouldn't think of up to 10 years as being beginner, but BFRDP does. And there have been a number of grants made in past years to programs that were focusing on farmers in different stages of development, so maybe in that 3 to 6 year range or the 7 to 10 year range. So you can keep that in the back of your mind too as you're thinking about how to design your projects. The reason we selected this topic is that, you know, BFRDP says Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program, or it stands for that, and the R for ranchers seems like an underrepresented area. I looked at the data from the past reports, and it says that 50% of the awards they've made have included some kind of livestock program. But when I read through the project descriptions, I see very few that were really designed for the specific needs of ranchers and grazers. And there's a growing interest from what I can tell in my work, which is national. Happy to hear from you guys as well about this, but there does seem to be growing interest in you know, pasture-raised animals and, you know, grass-fed meats in the marketplace, and more people wanting to take these kinds of approaches in raising livestock, and maybe not so many programs that are there to help people get started. So our thinking was, hey, let's try to reach this potentially underserved group and see how we can help rancher training programs either get started or build their capacity and be successful in applying for BFRDP funding, because it can be a really excellent resource. So again, here's the piece about the less than 10 years. Focus on supporting beginning farmers or ranchers with less than 10 years of experience. This is the basic purpose of the program. They want to create successful and sustainable farm businesses. So this is distinct from things like community gardens and other gardening programs. They want farms as businesses. They're not saying that the farmers can't have off-farm jobs as well, but that really you're farming as a business and with that intention. They have a list of topics in their curricula that are approved, and those are in the RFA, but it's quite extensive and pretty broad. So really any of farming topics that would be relevant for your programs would likely be on that list. The basic requirements for this program, this is a grant that's made to nonprofits as well as to colleges, universities, extension programs, and government agencies. Again, looking at the data from past years, it's been about 50-50 nonprofits and universities and other departments. So there is a lot of funding available for nonprofit programs. Training and technical assistance, again, I mentioned the meaning of those things. They do emphasize and, in fact, require that all your applications are collaborative, which means you have to have very significant partnerships established where you're really working together in a real way. And there's a 25% cost sharing or a matching funds requirement where 25% of your total budget has to come from non-federal sources, which can include in-kind contributions of staff time, volunteer time, things like that. Again, on these topics of the requirements, we have created a lot of resources, and you can review the RFA from last year kind of with the understanding that it's not likely to change a whole lot. I also created an online self-assessment tool with new entry, and we've been updating that, and it really will walk you through all of these things, whether you meet the basic eligibility requirements, and then it will go further with you in thinking through all the things you need to have in place to apply, and then also to manage a successful grant. So please, please do take advantage of those resources. The benefits of the program, I mean, obviously everyone thinks money when they think grants, so I put in the dollar amounts here. Some of the other benefits are that they do hold an annual project directors meeting where people come from across the country and talk about how their projects are going, which is a great way to, excuse me, to build your network and to really learn from others. They have also implemented a standardized reporting system, which is the results verification system, RVS. Some of the other USDA programs use RVS as well. It's pretty straightforward and you know, clear. I think it's pretty helpful in terms of helping you set up your evaluation goals and measuring results, so that can be useful for your program. And also, especially for this audience, thinking about how you're going to collaborate to apply for the program, and then once you get the funding, what you can do to build capacity in this broader field of beginning ranchers and grazers. I think this is really, to me, the most exciting piece of this topic, and why I wanted to talk about it in these webinars is that, you know, we'll hear from Monica in a few minutes, and in our next webinar we have Laura Payne from the Dairy Grazing Apprenticeship joining us, and hopefully others will jump in with comments. There's a lot of great work happening already. I think we are at a place where we could start building more of these networks and sharing information and resources, and so BFRDP could be a great resource for making that happen. The report that I mentioned earlier, this MTAC Evaluation report, highlights a lot of best practices in terms of what's worked for prior applicants. You can also go to farmanswers.org, which we'll send you a link for. This is a website, it's kind of an online library that's run by NEFA, and they have all the prior BFRDP projects in there with project summaries and presentations and reports. So there's lots to look at in terms of getting ideas. But some of the things that were highlighted in the report and that are, you know, common formats, farm incubator programs, these are definitely more common with vegetable farms, and something we can talk about further with Monica, but, you know, providing access to land for farms to get started. There's probably other ways to create incubators that would meet the needs of ranchers and grazers, so we can talk about those. Of course, classroom training, and classroom training can include webinars and other things that are more electronic, virtual. Mentorship and apprenticeship programs have a lot of different structures for these, university extension, outreach programs, and then, like I said, farmanswers.org has a whole bunch of examples for you. As Lindsay mentioned, there's a whole other category of BFRDP grants called educational enhancement teams. this is a pot of funding that NEFA put aside to basically help the applicants to the program. You know, this project that we're doing right now in terms of the applicant assistance was funded through this. The report I keep referring to where they looked at what BFRDP projects have achieved in the past was funded through this. It's a much, much smaller pot of funding, so it's not really a big opportunity for a lot of people to apply to, but if you are in a position where you have some resources like New Entry does for providing national assistance, it's something you might want to look at. Available resources, like I said, we've been working on this project for 2 years, and so we've created a number of different things. There's a website on through New Entry, which we'll send you a link to, that has all the prior webinars. It has a link to the online self-assessment tool, links to the BFRDP pages through NEFA and the prior announcements and reports, farm answers. So there's lots there, which is pretty cool because many USDA programs just don't have these kind of resources available. You have to really figure it out on your own, which I've done, and it's not easy. And Lindsay also mentioned that New Entry has provided a similar project on the Community Food Projects grants. So they have a lot of resources on that program as well. So just to get us thinking about this particular topic in terms of rancher and grazer programs, we invited Monica in to join the conversation because she runs a program for new ranchers and grazers, an apprenticeship program, and I'll let her talk more about it, but wanting to talk about some of these questions. So what types of training, technical assistance, and mentorship can best support beginning ranchers and grazers? Looking at the specific needs of this population. How are they different from vegetable farmers, and how can we structure projects that will be successful in helping these farmers get started, and also in terms of program operations and making it work for organizations that are running them, looking at what models are currently being used, what new ideas are out there that need funding and support. You know, webinars are a little bit of an awkward methodology for training because we don't get a lot of face-to-face interaction, and so it's very hard to have good discussions. However, like Lindsay said, we are going to open it up at the end and hope to have your questions, comments, ideas. We're going to do a second webinar, I believe it's 3 weeks from today on October 9th. And that one's going to talk further about this topic, but we're going to look even more in depth at collaborations. And we'd just love to have participation, ideas, and brainstorming, because again, I think this is really a fruitful time for looking at new collaborations and partnerships. All right, so I am going to hand things over to Monica of Quivira Coalition, and she's going to go a little bit more in depth on some of these topics.
Great, thank you, Allison. Can everybody hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, well, we'll go with that. If you can't hear me, please let me know. So like Allison said, I work with the Quivira Coalition, and I'm going to give you a little background about the Quivira Coalition and specifically the program that I direct, which is the New Agrarian Program. So the first thing I'll say is nobody knows how to say Quivira, so if you didn't, don't stress. It's a Spanish word that means unexplored territory, and so the beginning of our nonprofit it's really a coalition between ranchers and conservationists, and it came out of some of the range wars in the 1990s when a lot of the environmentalists and conservationists were really pushing for we should not let any cattle graze our national federal lands, and trying to find that unexplored territory where the ranchers could talk to conservationists and could find a radical center, which is where things can sort of move forward, where we can find that common ground. So we've been going for 21 years. We were founded in 1997, and we've had, we both do a lot of development of techniques for ecological restoration through grazing, and we've published a lot of books about how to do that, and we teach a lot of that through workshops on the ground. In some of the areas here in New Mexico, we've worked for 17 years on the ground, so really being able to share what is working and where do we still have these challenges about restoring lands through grazing. And about 10 years ago, in 2008, we said, you know, what is missing? I forgot to say, we also have a big conference that we've brought a lot of people together to really hear both sides of some of these complex issues. And about 10 years ago, we said, you know, what's really missing is that, you know, so many of the ranchers that are really willing to try and learn and implement and report back on what is working, on how do you have a ranch that is sustainably viable and more regenerative and ecologically sustainable, they're aging out, like many of our agriculturalists across the country in all sectors. And so we formed the New Agrarian Program, and it was originally a partnership with an individual ranch in southern Colorado that was really committed to teaching the next generation of these regenerative ranchers. We now work with, this year we worked with 10 ranches, and we have 10 apprentices, and we're still growing. We've worked primarily in the Southwest, and we're expanding sort of to work across the arid to semi-arid West, all the way to California and Montana and the Dakotas and everywhere in between. And as we started forming this program, we really thought about, you know, so much of what needs to be taught in an apprenticeship setting comes from that direct mentorship relationship. You know, you can get some things from classroom management, but so much of what you learn about as a farmer or rancher, it comes from this idea of like, well, it's just enough, but not too much. So let me back up and say that, like, my background is I apprenticed on a farm, and I worked on farms in New England for 10 years, and a lot of vegetables and also a lot of livestock, mostly dairy farms. And then I managed a farmer training program that is in Ferguson, Missouri, right outside of St. Louis, for 3 years before coming out here. And so I definitely have more experience on the vegetable side, but I have significant livestock experience as well. And I know that so much of what you have to teach the next generation is like, well, I mean, how wet does this need to be? Like, how tall does the grass need to be when you need to move them? And the answer is almost always like, just tall enough, but not too tall, right? And so like, that's not something that is really well communicated in a book, and it's also something that is often very state specific. So we really focus on finding the ranchers and making sure that they're good mentors and helping them find the right person to come on as an apprentice. And then we look at what other pieces we can add that can help to take something off of a mentor's plate, because that's a huge job. So we host an orientation for our apprentices. We partner with Holistic Management International to do a course that's partly in person but largely online on financial planning, biological monitoring, business planning and marketing, land management, and they also have an option to take a grazing planning class. And then at the end, all of our apprentices attend our annual conference. And in addition to like getting to learn from some of the experts in the field, we also host something that we call Career Connection, which is a regenerative ag job fair. And it helps our mentors recruit and talk to some potential applicants for their apprenticeships for next year. And it helps the outgoing graduating apprentices start looking for either ranch management jobs or land opportunities or whatever is sort of the next step in their career ladder. Oh, here we go.
Yes. Are you able to change the slides, Monica? Otherwise, I can do it.
Yeah. Why don't you do it?
Cool.
I do not seem to
be
able to. So.
Are you ready for that one?
I am still seeing the same slide. Do do you want to pass it back to me and maybe I'll see if I can?
Oh, maybe I'm just changing it on mine. You have the ball, so there's a little gray, if you take your mouse and go over to the left, there's a little gray bar.
Yeah.
See it? And then there's arrows.
Oh,
there
okay.
you go.
Great.
Perfect.
Like I said, I have more experience on the actual hands in the dirt side than the technological side. This is a little bit about me. Like I said, I've worked, I would say mostly in poultry and dairy on the livestock side. So since coming out here, it's been helpful for me to see these are the pieces in beginning farmer training that do lend themselves really well to beginning rancher training. And then there are some places where I feel like we need something else, and trying to work with the ranchers and the apprentices that we work with to figure out what those other needs are and how we can reach them. So these are some of the unique challenges that we have seen for ranchers. So one is just the scale and the distance. So, we work with a lot of ranchers that are on 100,000 acres. And that, if you're not from the West, that seems absolutely insane, but a lot of the places we work get 7 inches of rain a year. And so, if you're gonna have enough head of cattle to support your family and to hire an apprentice, they need to eat, and there's just not, the lushness isn't there that a lot of times before you come back to the same place, you have to wait at least a return interval of a year. So there are a lot of places where, ranchers spend a lot of time driving and they don't leave their ranch. And that seems sort of counterintuitive to somebody from the East, but that's definitely a challenge that we see both in terms of investment and getting started as a beginning rancher, is getting access to that amount of land is challenging and is different, and it really requires us to do some additional teaching on how do you look at leases, how do you look at leases on federal lands, because realistically for most beginning ranchers, they aren't going to be able to buy 100,000 acres. And so they're going to have to learn how do you negotiate with a landowner, whether it's a federal landowner, whether it's a wealthy landowner, which kind of those situations will work for their personal needs and for their needs for their business. I mean, one of the other things that we run into is that, I have a lot of applicants to the apprenticeship who will say yeah, I have all this experience on a farm, and then in their application they talk about how much they love getting to harvest across from different people and talk to them, and I'm like, I hear you, I love that too, that's part of why I was a farmer. This is a really different kind of work, and making sure that people are aware that it's not all riding off on your horse into the sunset, right? And that to some degree is similar of a challenge to getting beginning farmers on the ground too, that it's not all rainbows and puppy dogs. One of the other challenges we find in delivering our program is internet access. We have a lot of folks who just don't have very solid internet or very fast internet, and so we do a lot of mentor training, and we originally tried to do a lot of those mentor trainings through webinars, and we now do that through a conference call, which is both better for the ranchers because, a lot of the older ranchers that we're trying to reach aren't as technologically gifted. And so, they know how to do a conference call and they know how to do email. And so I can email them, this is the PowerPoint even, or this is the slideshow that we're going to go through, and they can download it at a time when they have good internet, or if it takes a long time, that works. One of the challenges we've had is finding ranchers who are willing to bring on apprentices, kind of going back to the workforce place and into the liability. A lot of times these ranches, on 100,000 acres, it really just is a 2-person job. And so they don't have the ability to hire a big group of people, which is sometimes less appealing to some apprentices. And it's also this huge liability. If on the farm I managed, you know, if somebody really messed up and hoed down an entire bed of lettuce, like there's a lot of potential money that was lost, but it's not usually as much like investment as if, you know, you lose some of your cattle that you've been raising for like already 2 years before you can get a return on it. And there's sort of also more potential for things to go more wrong. So like if like somebody leaves a gate open or doesn't check the fence well, then like those cattle can get out on the road and can cause an accident. And so I think there's like hesitations that a lot of the ranchers have that we try and mitigate in terms of like talking with ranchers about how do you teach an apprentice in the beginning, like what are the big things you just have to watch for every time. I feel like I sort of addressed some of the land leads and the startup investment. So as we like sort of try and shepherd beginning ranchers through their whole career ladder, and we really, you know, our primary program that we do is this apprenticeship program, but we do recognize that we are part of a full career ladder. And that's, I think, where I think we can see what other pieces do they need to be able to, as the BFRDP is looking for, start successful, financially viable ranch businesses going down the road. And so making sure that they are prepared with the technical skills and the business skills and the financial skills and the land management skills, all of that so that they can be successful. So Quivira has applied for a BFRDP on our own, and we haven't been awarded one, but we've worked now with several other partners as part of some of these larger BFRDPs. So we're currently one of the subcontractors through No Entry and Tufts on their national EET, education and training. I can't remember what that stands for. So I want to say a little bit about like how we got into that. We started doing some research in 2015 about what are the best practices going on in agricultural apprenticeships across the country, and through that developed this mentor training, and also helped connect us with a lot of these other groups that are through this BFRDP forming the National Ag Apprenticeship Learning Network. And you know, as Allison said, really BFRDP is really focused on this idea of doing work through partnerships. And we see there's a lot of different ways that you can partner. And so it could be that you're partnering with other organizations that are focused on a different sector of the food system. And so maybe, you know, in some ways in the National Ag Apprenticeship Learning Network, we feel like we are the group that really talks the most about ranchers because that's the constituents that we work with the most. It might be like on some of the national works working on region. It could be like trying to do some mix of like having some folks do more of the education to beginning farmers or ranchers, and some folks work more on supporting the mentors through the mentor training. So that's sort of what we've been working on overall, is doing some research to share and document some of the best practices to help there be more specifically apprenticeship programs on this around the country, and especially in ranching. And then also we've focused a lot on this mentor training aspect because there's a lot of ranchers that are doing great work out there, and I think the teaching part is not always something that comes naturally to all of them. So in thinking about some of the ways that like we'd be excited to like, we have built partnerships and we are excited to build partnerships with other folks. Like I said, we have a conference that is in Albuquerque. It's called the Regenerate Conference. It's coming up in about 6 weeks, which is why the office is getting a little crazy around here. As part of that, through the Ag Apprenticeship Learning Network, we are having a gathering the 2 days before then. We've been working a lot with this mentor training idea. And so, like I said, we do it through phone calls, and it's open not only to our mentors, but to mentors in ag across the country. And so last year we had folks participate from Rhode Island, and Chicago and all across the West. So one of the things we also have worked a lot on is like thinking about the apprenticeship, that like it needs to be a good connection between that mentor and the apprentice. So we have apprentice applications up. I'm also really happy if anybody wants to start an apprenticeship program in ranching or in farming, you're welcome to take our apprentice application and use it as a template. Like, we really want to share that broadly. And then we try and work in some of our ways to like work across that career ladder. We host these career connection events, like I said, that are a job fair, and then we also send out a newsletter once a month that has other opportunities. So we try and keep in touch a lot with our alumni to make sure that that, you know, after they finish their apprenticeship program, that we can support them in staying in agriculture by helping to connect them through these job fairs, through attendance at our conference, through the newsletter, and finding the next step. And, you know, Allison mentioned a little bit about RVS, the results verification system, and one of the things that has been really helpful for us over the years is keeping in touch with our alumni so that we can say 90% of the people who have gone through this apprenticeship program are still in agriculture. And like that, you know, really for a BFRDP that wants to make sure that there are these viable businesses, that is the like bottom line that they're hoping for. That is what I have, and I'm more than happy to talk about some other, if there's other questions. I guess the one other thing I wanted to say about partnerships is that one of the other partnerships we've been looking at is on the other end of the career ladder is that, you know, a lot of our mentors want to have apprentices because it's a high risk to bring on an apprentice for the investments they have. They want to have apprentices that have some livestock experience. And so we're trying to partner with, you know, a lot of the agricultural schools to bring in, like, make connections to animal science and folks who have some of that grounding from there, to other of the apprenticeship programs that maybe do some exposure to livestock, but like for people who really want to dig in more, and with other organizations that want to work on sort of that exposure part for people who, like, if they didn't grow up in a ranch or farm context, who already know by the time they get to an apprenticeship, like, this is what I want to do with my life. Because I think that's really where the apprenticeship piece fits into the broader career ladder. So am I handing this back off to, who am I handing this back off to?
I already have it.
Oh, good.
Thank you, Monica.
Great.
That was excellent.
That was great, Monica. Yeah, thank you so much. I'll just reiterate what Monica was saying about collaborations, and to point back to the BFRDP program, that they do require that all applications are collaborative. And there's a couple of different benefits of this. You know, one is that if your organization has never applied for a federal grant, or you're really kind of a small organization and you're not sure if you have the infrastructure to do the application and manage the award yourself, you can be a subcontractor like Quivira has done on an application submitted by a bigger organization or a more experienced organization. And in that way, they'll share some of the grant funds with you, and you'll have a specific role in the project. It'll get you in the door with BFRDP, and also put you in a place where you can be learning from others. The other exciting topic is this idea of partnering with more organizations across this field of rancher and grazer training and support to build up the network and share best practices. And it sounds like Quivira is really interested in doing that and sharing their materials and sharing what they've learned, and I'm sure there's others as well that want to do things like that. So in our next webinar on October 9th, we're going to talk more about partnerships and collaborations, kind of how to make them work, what they could potentially look like, and then hopefully bringing together a few more organizations that are working in this area. Just a couple final thoughts. Even though the RFA is not out yet, this is the perfect time to be starting to think about your applications. I've done 42 applications myself, and I've heard from many other people that have done them. When the RFA is announced, you'll likely get 60 days to put together your application. If you've never done a federal grant, you're probably thinking, oh my God, 60 days, that's plenty of time, that's a long time. But I guarantee you, it's not, and it goes very, very quickly. These are very complex applications, and so thinking ahead is going to be crucial to your success. I just can't say it enough. The other thing that really takes a lot of time is this partnership piece. So you're needing basically to look around and do research like Monica said they were doing, who else is out there, what's happening in the field, who would I like to partner with, and starting to have these conversations with partners and finding out who's interested in working with you and how would that relationship work and who would do what and all of that. You know, it's a long process, and it's a process that you want to go well to set you up for success. The other piece is if you've never applied for a federal grant, you have to register if you're going to be the organization submitting the proposal. And there's information about that also on the new entry page. It's basically a two-part registration. There's something called the SAM registration, and then there's the grants.gov registration, and they can take a few weeks. So if you're wanting to apply for a federal grant, you can do that now, and then you'll have it out of the way. Again, just a review of the resources that we have. Lindsay will send out a follow-up email. Please do take the survey she sends out. They're very, very short, but there's a blank box for you to give ideas, and we really build this program around what we hear back. So we'd love your feedback. Follow-up, we covered. October 9th is the next webinar on this topic, and then we are planning to do a few more later this fall once the RFA comes out, likely on evaluation, and then what other topics we hear from you. These are email addresses, and I think now we could just open up to questions. Lindsay, if you want to unmute people. I haven't seen questions come in, but I'm not the host, so maybe there are questions coming in to you, Lindsay, that Monica or I can answer.
So I did just unmute everyone, but there was one question from someone who had to leave a little bit early, and he was asking if this webinar was being recorded, and so I did not mention that, but yes, we are recording, and I will send out the link to this webinar to everyone who signed up, and it will go on our website as well.
My name's Charlie. I have a couple questions.
Sure.
Yes, go ahead, Charlie.
Okay. My first question is, going back to New Mexico, how many of the folks that have gone through your program, how many actually become farmers or ranchers? Roughly, I mean, so percentage.
Yeah, so this is Monica. So we have 90% of them have stayed in ag. A couple of those have not stayed as like a rancher per se. Like one of them manages the rangeland grazing program for Pima County, Arizona. So she's leasing land to grazers, and we have somebody in sort of a similar role in Colorado. But I would say that probably
my question would be, you know, of the 90%, what part of them actually own the ranch? In other words, the title to the ranch is in their name and they're the bosses, rather than being an employee in an agricultural business.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we're 10 years out from our first apprentices, and there are maybe 40% are owners, and that I would say is like, they might be like a partner in an LLC that owns the ranch. So they don't own the ranch themselves, but they are owners in the business that manages the ranch. Very, very few of the ones out here own land. So I think there are a couple that are on smaller scale dairies. But some of them own the business, even if they're not a landowner, if that clarifies.
So in the Northeast where there are ranches, I've lived in Oregon and worked in Oregon, so I'm familiar with the West, but in the Northeast, the ranches, the beef ranches, if you will, or horse ranches, they're called farms. And so my basic question is, the money from this program, is it to build capacity for the nonprofits, or can it be used by a farmer and a for-profit business person, which is what I am, to actually start a ranch incubator for, in my case, new Americans?
I can answer that question. This is Allison. So, Charlie, this program, they only make the direct grant awards to nonprofit organizations or universities.
Right. Now that part I understand. Yeah, I understand because I applied last year. My question though is the intent, and I realize that I would have to partner with a nonprofit. But my question is the intent? Go ahead.
I do understand your question, I think. So
okay.
I think that, yes, theoretically, yes, you could use some of these funds to create a new incubator program, and I think that that could be a very interesting proposal. What you would need to be very careful about researching is the budget rules for how the funds can be used. So for instance, there's limited, like you couldn't use the money to buy land. You couldn't, in a lot of cases, there's limitations on buildings and certain types of construction. But you can use it for certain kinds of equipment and materials and staff and things like that. So you just have to really review all of the rules, and you can work with New Entry or with the USDA directly to get answers sometimes if you have a question that you can't find a.
Have to unload
that.
Well, I guess partially the answer is it. So let's say I was to partner with a nonprofit. Could the nonprofit be an organization that is not directly related to agriculture, but they're directly related to serving the new Americans, which is another word for refugees? And I'd have a farm myself, so there would be needs, but it wouldn't be land or buildings or such, or livestock. So could something like that be applicable?
I think that potentially could work. What I would suggest that you do too is, get in touch with us after the webinar. Maybe you could send an email to myself and to Lindsay, and we could try to help you get further into the specifics. I think that, it can work. Again, there's also rules about how the money is distributed between partners, so that all the partners in a collaborative proposal have to be engaged in the project carrying out the work. It can't be like a pass-through situation. But let's give a few minutes here to see if we have any other questions, and certainly follow up with us and we'll help you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions out there?
Yes, I do have a question that came in from Kiera. First of all, she said, insightful presentation. She's wondering, I think this question is for Monica, where do you recruit young adult farmers with livestock experience? And then there's another question too, I'll just list them both. And then she says, I'm writing the approach piece now. Any technical writing tips for this section?
Yeah, okay, I can say something about both of those questions. So we do a lot of recruiting online. We do a lot of posting through like some of the job posting sites like ATRA, which is a big national internship collection, and Good Food Jobs. That's where we just say in there that we want to have people who have some livestock experience. And the mentors we work with, there's a little bit of a range of how much livestock experience they want or sort of feel like they require. I mean, I think they all would love to have people who have more livestock experience, but like they're definitely willing to work with people who have limited exposure but are really eager to learn. That seems to be the biggest point, is like if somebody really wants to learn and is curious and is going to be committed throughout the season, that goes a lot farther in a lot of ways than the experience does. Like I said, we also reach out a lot to these, to some of the land grant universities, and through like 4-H or FFA, or that's another way that we get young adults who have been, you know, maybe more on ranches and farms that maybe they're more curious about finding a different methodology for raising livestock, but they have, you know, been around cattle or sheep before. So I have, I don't remember the approach section specifically, but the pieces of advice I'd give from looking at a lot of federal grants is, if there is like, in the RFA, there's usually some sort of like objectives, I would 100% like turn that into a table and say, this is how we address objective A, like make sure that people are, you know, the people in the program can like start viable businesses. Well, we address this through business plan training and this and that. And like, in general, like I find, having read a lot of government grants, you have reviewers who have to review a lot of grants, and if you can make it like less flowery language and more like really clear, and that's where I feel like tables and charts can come in really handy, of like how you address each point on that, the better. And maybe Allison or Lindsay has other advice on that.
Yeah, I totally second what you said, Monica. You know, keep it clear and to the point, and there's lots of repetition. And don't be concerned about repetition, because that is part of the way the proposals are structured. They ask you the same questions in a lot of different ways, and you feel like you're repeating yourself, but just do it and be clear and to the point. I think maybe those are the most general instructions you can give at this point. And keep in mind that your audience may not know a whole lot about what you're doing. So you want to keep it, you know, as little jargon as you can, like Monica said, not flowery, just very simple and straightforward. And make sure you follow the directions to a T and answer every single question they ask you.
Yeah, that was going to be my input, is follow the directions, write what they ask of you, for sure. All right, anyone else have any other questions? I did mute the participants just because folks there was some background noise, so don't take it personally, but if you have a question, you can put it into the chat box. We are just about out of time, but maybe just one more if anyone has any. If not, that's okay too. All right, well, if any other questions come in, I will send them to Allison or Monica, but thank you all for joining us. Again, I'll send out a webinar probably tomorrow with this recorded video and all these resources that we mentioned. Allison and Monica both mentioned a lot of great resources, and I will send all those links out to everyone as well. Thank you all.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you, Allison.
Thanks,
and Monica.
Thanks, Allison. Great talking with you all.
Yeah. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.